Howdy folks, I'm Colonel Sanders and you're not. I want to talk about my cousin Margaret. Now, I've talked about Mildred and Margaret before on this page, the Colonel's two daughters. They were both my cousin. They were Josephine King's daughters, and they had a brother, Harlan David Sanders Jr., that died in his 20s, very young age. He had a tonsil infection, and from that infection, he died. And so he didn't have children to carry on the Sanders name, but the two surviving daughters were to go on to work for Kentucky Fried Chicken and make lives of their own, and also have a lot of family of their own too that are around today. I can't talk much about the family that's alive today. I don't know them. I don't know Mildred's side that well. I don't know Margaret's at all. I only had one encounter with them online, and they didn't even know that there were any Sanders left, which we never got back in contact after that. I was told by Mildred's side they're not interested in the attention that comes with being related to Colonel Sanders or what I'm doing, so to not basically give out their information or who they are or where they are on the web here. So I'm going to respect their wishes, but I can talk about my deceased cousins. I can talk about Uncle Harley, and I will, and I can and will talk about his parents, who are also my three great-grandparents, and all the other lineage of my family that led down to me existing. I like to talk about that stuff because it has to do with Kentucky Fried Chicken, and that's why you guys follow me, right? So anyways, Margaret was never close with my side of the family. Mildred was. Up until Mildred's death in 2010, she kept in touch with my grandpa Ed and sent Christmas cards every year, and they just talked back and forth through letters the old-fashioned way. She died in 2010, and we haven't had any contact really with their family other than the few times that I've encountered some of them online through the post that I was doing. So I've always was told that Margaret didn't like my side of the family, and that's what I have reiterated out to the public whenever they asked about the daughters and what their family thought. I would tell them, well, I didn't know Margaret. Margaret apparently, according to my family, didn't like our side very much. She didn't pay us the time of day. But Mildred was very kind to her family, and we stayed in contact until she died in 2010. Mildred had her own hands in Kentucky Fried Chicken. We talk about her and Miss Millie's Awesome Chicken and all that stuff. But today is just about Margaret and her book, The Colonel's 11 Herbs and a Spicy Daughter. Now, in this book, she goes on to talk about what many articles refer to as the Colonel's sex life and skeletons in the closet. Now, I was always told by all my family that's outside of Margaret's family that book was nothing but exaggerations and lies. I've never read the book myself. I didn't plan on reading the book, especially if it had something to do with my uncle's sex life. That's none of my business, and I don't really want to know about it. But I came across this article of Margaret when she died in 2001 that talked about her. So I never really knew much about her. And I started surrounding myself with people that did know her. The family of JRN, the franchisees, they knew Margaret very well. Not Mildred so much as Margaret. They grew up around Margaret a lot, and she was always so kind to them. So I got to learn stories about Margaret from the JRN family, and they also told me Margaret had some wild stories that they weren't sure whether were true or not themselves, but they were wild stories and fun to listen to. My cousins on Lee's side, I love them to death. They were great people. They told me that Lee's wife, Jean, always said that the book that was written was just to get back at Claudia for taking the Colonel away from Josephine, their father away from their mother, and that it was nothing but lies and exaggerations. So I learned that they're making a documentary, a biopic film on Uncle Harley. Everyone thinks that it's this KFC documentary, and it's not. It is based off of the book 11 Herbs and a Spicy Daughter, strictly about Margaret's relationship with her father in relation to this book, true or not, exaggerated or not. I plan on reading this now because of what I've read in this article that I'm going to read to you guys, because Margaret actually sounds like somebody I would have gotten along with. Whether she exaggerated things or not, she sounds like somebody I would get along with, and I'll tell you why after we get through it a bit. But I talked with the director of the documentary, and she told me she wasn't interested in talking with any of the other family to sort things out, figure out what's true and what's not, because I told her that I was trusting that she would not put any misinformation or things we weren't sure were accurate in the film, because by making it into a film, today's society believes everything that they see without any facts to back it up. So I didn't want to have to clean up that mess of cleaning up the rumors. I said I wouldn't watch that film because she wouldn't talk with any of the... She didn't have to talk with me, but I would prefer her to talk with my grandfather and my cousins on Lee's side that knew the Colonel and knew Margaret and could give their perspective of her. Now, Lee's side never had any issues with Margaret, just that book they didn't agree with. But with Margaret, they got along with her. They even got some Christmas cards from her. My side, when we went to the centennial celebration in 1990, she didn't pay any attention to my grandfather, my father, my uncle, or my grandmother. None of that family was given the time of day. She wouldn't look at them, and this is what I was told. So growing up, this is the story and the perspective that I'm given of Margaret. Doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean it is true. It's just the perspective. I've been given different perspectives of the lady. And growing up in Florida, we lived so close to her. I was raised in Florida, and she died in 2001. Her family was still around and still is in the area. I grew up near them, didn't even know it, and they didn't know that we existed either because we were never talked about. Uncle Jim was talked about, Grandpa Clarence was talked about, but not his son Charles, who did not live in Florida most of his life. He lived there to run a motel in Tampa, Florida, and Uncle Harley had a home in Tampa, Florida too. Karen, my cousin Lee's daughter, went to visit him and shared me this photo that they took in Tampa, Florida before the colonel died. I don't know what year it was. He's kind of heavy set in this, and he's also not as frail looking, so I'm assuming it is sometime in the late 60s, early 70s, because by 1975 he started to get a little skinny around the bones from his illnesses that he was going through. He had leukemia. Learning some stories from the JRN family from a different perspective, because Margaret's family, I don't know, I haven't talked to them. I'd like to. One of my biggest dreams as a kid was to connect all the family together, because I grew up learning that none of the family was in contact anymore. We didn't know who was left, who all was new. We didn't know any of it. And I just wanted to connect all the immediate family, the colonel's kids, the colonel's sister's kids, and my side of the family, which my side of the family was already connected. I wanted to connect everyone else. I learned that not everybody wants to be connected, and that's fine. It took me a few years to understand that and come to terms with that. It's nothing against me or anyone else. It's just they don't want the attention of it. It's been so long since he's been dead, and none of the family's involved in the business, so what good does it do any of us, right? What profit, what benefit does the family get from doing this? I just want the story to be heard right. I want it to be known right. I want all the accurate information out there, and I want the misinformation and the slander against my uncle to stop on the internet. It never will stop, but I want to be able to counter it so that when I'm gone, people could say, well, this guy was related to the colonel, and he had some very verifiable sources to back up the claims that he has to counteract these rumors. So anyways, let's talk about Margaret. Well, I'm going to read you this article. Margaret Sanders, the eldest daughter of the Kentucky Fried Chicken founder Colonel Harlan Sanders, died from congestive heart failure Wednesday in West Palm Beach. She was 91. Miss Sanders, who referred to herself as the Spicy Daughter in a book she wrote, corresponded with Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity. That is part of why I think I would have gone along with her. She had such a out of the box, way out there mind. She could understand these kind of things, and that's kind of how my mind works. Now, just because all the rest of the family didn't agree with her book, or just because they might have a misunderstanding, maybe she didn't have an issue with my side, she just didn't know us, so she didn't really go out of her way to say anything. I don't know, I wasn't there. That's between her and my grandparents, and she's gone now, and it's between her and the other cousins. I'm just going by what I was told growing up. And I've learned so much that some of the stories I have been told don't line up with what actually happened. It is very awkward for me, somebody who didn't know the colonel, didn't know Margaret, to go up to a family member of mine that I've known my whole life, or even if I just met them that did know the colonel and is remembering it this way. It is so awkward for me to tell them that they're wrong because I wasn't there. But I'm not afraid to do it. I will do it, and I will show them why, and then eventually they come to terms and they realize, oh, I remembered it wrong. Okay, whatever. So that's awkward for me to have to do, but I will do it because I'm not going to just do it to the people online. I'm going to also do it to the family when we don't remember something right. And somebody asked me, where do you get all your information from? I get it from word of mouth of family photos and videos that we have, extended family, franchisees, people who used to work for Kentucky Fried Chicken, people who lived near Uncle Harley, people who worked for one thing or other, whether it was some kind of construction on a franchise, whether it was maintenance, whatever it was. It could have been a hospital worker. There's somebody that knew the colonel or the business in some way, shape, or form. I get the information from them too. The family that worked for the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the family that worked for Lee's, the family that knew them. And I also get the information from the internet. There's a lot of information that's accurate and a lot of misinformation. You gotta know what to look for. So I take all the stories and stuff and I combine them and I follow the path of the correct information that also fills in the blanks of the stuff that's online. And when you do that, you get the full story and you clear some things up and things make sense, because this side of the family has one bit of information, this side of the family has the other bit of information. There's something missing in the center. And that thing that's online or that thing from a franchisee that you could pull out and put in there makes it make sense. Yeah, this is the journey I've been on. This is also why I say don't just base your opinion off of one location like I did 8 years ago. Maybe there's a different perspective somewhere that you can get better quality from instead of basing it on one experience. So anyways, she searched for the lost continent of Atlantis. Again, I would like this lady. I would like my cousin Margaret. We would get along. There's some things I don't agree with. I don't agree with putting personal life like Uncle Harley, and we'll get into the book here. I haven't read the book, but this talks about some things that are in the book. I don't agree with publicizing that stuff because some things just should be kept private. She sold cars in Florida. She worked as a Kentucky Fried Chicken waitress in Salt Lake City. She ran a body relaxation treatment business in Lexington, Kentucky. She worked in a gun plant and acted in Louisville, Louisville. She helped start an iBank in New York City. Said her daughter Josephine Worcester, I can't pronounce your name, sorry. I think she's still around today, of Ocean Ridge. I read that off like it was one of the things she worked on. She was always picking up and moving away. She wasn't happy being in one place, Worcester said. Miss Sanders sculpted many famous people. This is accurate because I remember seeing the bust. I haven't been to Cave Hill Cemetery. There's another bust just like it that's in the Corbin Museum, and I believe Margaret made that. And she also sculpted several mugs for Kentucky Fried Chicken of Uncle Harley's face. She did all kinds of things like that. She's artistic. She was outgoing. And she was wacky. You know, Mildred was known for being wacky too and being a funny person, but Margaret seems like they're two peas in a pod. So putting aside the things that I grew up learning from the one perspective, and I'm not trying to diss on anybody. I'm not trying to say anybody was in the wrong. I'm just saying we had one perspective, and that's how it was perceived, and that was the story growing up with. So now that I've been able to do more research, get in contact with more people, I'm able to open a new perspective. And I'm hoping to open this perspective for the rest of the family that didn't know Margaret that well. Because the fact that they didn't know her that well and she didn't pay them too much attention didn't give them the insight to want to look into her life and how she was and what kind of person she was. Mildred did give us the time of day. She did make sure she was outgoing for everybody. It didn't matter how related you were. And that did get interest sparked in her life, such as learning about the signage company that her husband ran and still is in operation today. Most of the stuff around Corbin, Kentucky and JRN works with that signage company. Her sculpture of her, get back to Margaret, her sculpture of her father overlooking his grave in Louisville Cave Hill Cemetery. It was a good given talent. She never had any lessons, her daughter said, but it was her book that drew international attention. In the book The Colonel's Secret, published in 1996, Sanders brought out family skeletons. This is the part that I don't agree with. I mean, she is the Colonel's daughter. She had every right to post whatever she wanted to do, just as I do. But there comes a line that I do draw where if it's someone's personal life, if you're writing about it or making a movie about it simply to get attention, that's wrong. I don't believe this stuff should have been put out on the web, but it was, and this is why I addressed the cheating allegations. This is the only thing that I have heard a rumor on Uncle Harley that has been true. All the other stuff I've heard that's been brought to me is bullcrap, but he did cheat on his wife. And I don't care what any of the other family says. I don't care what Margaret's family says, Mildred's family says, what my loving cousins on Lee's side say. Uncle Harley cheated on his first wife, Josephine. They had many, many, many hardships throughout their marriage. That does not give you any reason to cheat on your spouse. But they had many ups and downs. They even separated for some time. They got back together and ended up divorcing, and it was over this. Uncle Harley did respect Josephine, and according to her niece, which I don't believe everything that is told to me about that, they claim to have the recipe publicly on my page, I call bullcrap. They may have it, I don't know. I say nobody in the family has it. And that's that, because that's easily proven, that's easily said, and if somebody's publicly claiming to have the recipe, well then just show it, because you just show it if you're going to publicly claim it and hold it over my head. Or if you, I got family that's unsure if they have it, like Lee's side, but that's another thing. It included some disclosure of the Colonel's sex life and the fact that he had a mistress. Tabloid newspapers as far away as England called Kentucky about the book subtitled 11 Herbs and the Spicy Daughter. Miss Sanders once wrote to Einstein telling him about her theory of relativity and what she thought about his. He wrote back, her daughter said. Mother had one of these far-out minds that understood that stuff. Miss Sanders also had a big interest in the lost continent of Atlantis and flew to, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Bimini in search of it. She worked at her father's restaurant in Corbin, Kentucky for a time. Grandpa told her to get her, quote, damn, unquote, hands out of the clay and get into the kitchen. Now, before I continue on this part, I have said in the past that maybe the daughters knew what the recipe was, because anybody who had anything to do with the recipe had to sign an NDA with Kentucky Fried Chicken in '64 when Uncle Harley sold out. I know Claudia knew it. Josephine might have known part of it. I don't think it was fully developed when they were married. They might have been. It might have been. And I know Lee knew what it was, which is how Lee's side would have it if they did have the recipe. I don't know if they do or not, but they left public comments, which made me have to address it. I haven't seen it. I don't know if they actually think that that's it or not. They just know that Lee had a bunch of stuff when he died, and it wasn't like Uncle Harley where it all got auctioned off or donated. His stuff was given to his daughter and his son, and if they have it, it came from that. But I don't know. Miss Sanders, who later was Kentucky Fried Chicken franchisor for Florida, which now I believe part JRN owns some of those franchises, and KBP Brands, I believe, owns part of the franchises. There might be another franchisor in Florida that owns Florida franchises. They're all over the country, folks. Took credit for the concept of takeout fried chicken. Mom hated to cook. That's why she started the takeout concept, her daughter said. As for the Colonel's secret recipe, she did not know that. See, I wasn't sure if Margaret knew it or not, or Mildred. I did credit them that maybe they did know, because Uncle Harley did write it on the door jamb. Told him this is it if anything ever happened to him before it was called Kentucky Fried Chicken. But this saying she did not know that. I know Mildred's side doesn't have it, because I talked with them. I have talked with them, and they wanted to make that clear that they don't have the recipe. The most annoying question this family gets whenever any of us tell anybody we're related to the Colonel is, do you have the recipe? I used to play around with people online because Joe Leddington posted that fake bogus recipe with that bogus story that caused some issues with the family. But we won't go into that. But because he did that, when people asked me, I would just rickroll them. I go, yeah, I do, and rickroll them, which was funny to me at the time, and now it's not anymore. Anyways, I decided to put all that stuff behind me and start doing research on the recipe, and that's where my theory comes in. That's on the pinned video of my YouTube page. My final theory on my uncle's recipe, 11 herbs and spices, that I got from facts. Instead of doing clickbait, instead of doing pretending to get sued for releasing it, instead of doing comedy sketches over the recipe or whatever, I decided to find out what's actually out there and what can I do to utilize that to disprove Joe's recipe and other recipes. Anyway, so I know Mildred didn't have it. Now Margaret, I know, doesn't have it after finding this paper. Her story is that he wrote it up above a door frame in the restaurant in Corbin. Accurate. He said, if anything happens, here's the recipe. Accurate. But the recipe was painted over before she ever learned it or wrote it down. I believe that. Miss Sanders died in a West Palm Beach hospice. A memorial service is scheduled for 2 p.m. It's already happened. Thursday at Scott B. Cone Bowden Funeral Home in Boynton, Florida. Bonton. Yeah, that's all, folks. In addition to her daughter, she is survived by 2 sons, Harlan Adams of Merritt Island and Trig Adams of Coconut Grove. Heard of Trig Adams. I believe Harlan Adams died, I think. Pretty sure he did. I think Trig's still around, but I'm not sure. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. I saw a photo of Harlan Adams. He passed away. He was a skier, I believe. I'll try to pull up that photo when I edit this video to show you guys, but I'm pretty sure he passed away. Trig Adams, I think, is still around, but I'm not sure. She's survived by her sister Mildred Ruggles, who she died in 2010, 9 years later, in Lexington, Kentucky. 9 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. There are so many family out there today that don't even know I exist, or maybe they do and they just don't care. I know there's a lot of family on Mildred's side. Someday I hope everybody just gets over themselves and we could have one big family reunion. We had one a couple years ago in Corbin, Kentucky at the Sanders Cafe and the Colonel Fest. Lee's side of the family, not all of them. And my side, not all of them. Just me, my grandpa, and Lee's daughter, his last surviving child, her husband, her daughter and husband. And we had a family reunion. The first family reunion in the Colonel's family that wasn't having to do with the grandkids. I think they do have a family reunion, but I'm never invited to it. I don't know about it, and they don't know about me, so I don't blame them for not inviting me. So no hate towards them. But with the Sanders family, this is the first family reunion we've been to since 1990 at the Centennial Celebration in Corbin, Kentucky. So we took where the last one was, where we all were, the Colonel's daughters and the Sanders family and Lee's side of the family. We all met in 1990, before I was born, at the Centennial Celebration for the grand opening of the Harlan Sanders Cafe and Museum. We had a family reunion there. None of the family met after that. Sanders kept to themselves. I don't know what Mildred and Margaret's side of the family did, other than Mildred reaching out to us every Christmas. And I didn't even know Lee's side existed. I didn't know that until a couple of years ago. I got in contact with them. And because of my previous encounters with other family that wasn't too enthusiastic about the Colonel's story being told by family members anymore, I was a bit skeptical on talking to them because I didn't want to be treated the way that I was in the past. And they were so loving and caring. We ended up having a family reunion. It was great. And now we welcome everybody in the Colonel's family. It doesn't matter if you're a distant cousin. Doesn't matter if you're a nephew, a niece, a grandchild. Doesn't matter your past. We want everybody to join and have a big family reunion, share our stories, because as I've done this for the last few years, talking about the family history, so many people have seen a rebirth in their love for Kentucky Fried Chicken, the history, their family history, reminiscing through our stories, our history, our family photos and videos, and remembering. So it's been a great thing. So even those folks that didn't want to be involved, if you want to be involved, here's my invitation to you. Reach out through my page, reach out somehow. Let us know. We'll be happy to welcome you. Everything's in the past. We're happy to welcome all family in. Except for Joe Leddington. Screw you. Joe Leddington isn't related to me. He's a step cousin. I call him a step cousin. Because he decided to be a liar and rude. And instead of embracing the truth and admitting that he lied about a recipe or maybe made a mistake, he doubled down on it and said that it was the recipe and it was the Colonel's handwriting. Anyways, I disproved all that. So, yeah, that's a story about Margaret Sanders, Margaret Adams, the Adams family. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Cringe, cringe. Do-do-do-do. 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 I wonder how many times they've gotten that joke. They probably won't talk to me now that I did that. I can tell you, folks are going to be interested in the last names of the family, or any Sanders left. I see that on the top of Google when you're looking up stuff with Kentucky Fried Chicken. There are Sanders left. The last Sanders involved was 1989 is when he died. It was James Wilbur Sanders, Kentucky Colonel, brand ambassador for Kentucky Fried Chicken, and franchisee of Seymour in Columbus, Indiana. That was the last Sanders involved in KFC after Uncle Harley died. The Colonel's sister's side, you have the Omers, and they have their own line of hot sauce today. We're going to look into that in a later video. And then you have Lee's side, the Cummings, and then the Cummings branch off into the Edwards and the Bennetts and so many other different last names. You have John Alexander Sanders' side of the family, which was the Colonel's uncle. He had Howard Sanders, another son. Don't know what happened to him, but I don't see any genealogy record showing that Howard's brother had children. And if he did have children, that it doesn't show that they were Sanders. They married into different names. Howard has family today, and I talked about them before, so I could talk about them now. Their last names are Curtis and Place. And then you have other family members on the Colonel's grandkids side without giving away who they are or their jobs or whatever, because again, they stress that I do not talk about that. That was a couple years ago when I was talking with them. You got Ice, you got Ruggles, you got Adams, you got, oh, there's another one there, I can't remember it. This is why I want to connect the whole family. We don't have to publicize everything, but I like to know everything. But I get why they don't want to be on the internet, because they don't want their lives publicized. They don't want their family exploited. They don't want the names and stuff. When you search someone up, you can't find me on any public family trees of Colonel Sanders. You can't find all of his grandchildren. You can't find all of his nieces and nephews, and there's a reason for that. Not everybody wanted to be put on there. People should be entitled to their privacy. I kind of gave up my privacy by doing what I do, but that side of the family would like to keep their privacy. But those are some of the last names that are involved with Colonel Sanders' family. You also have Dunleavys, Cleggs, Cathcarts. There's quite a big bunch of names there. But if you look back into, you'll find thousands of people related to Colonel Sanders across the world because of all the different last names, all the different family branches that are out there that connect to him. The Dunleavy family, the Colonel's mother's side of the family, is a huge family. Now, if you do happen to ever meet any of the Colonel's grandchildren and they do happily share who they are, you might realize, I know I've seen some photos of them online. They resemble him in a way, but they more so resemble their paternal side rather than their maternal side. And we're saying paternal as in their father's side versus their mother's side, and the mother's side is the Colonel's daughters. So you can see some resemblances there, but the paternal side of their family has stronger genes that have them resemble that more. But there's certain facial expressions you'll see in them where they do resemble the Colonel. The Sanders side heavily, as you can see, resembles the Colonel. Even my sister resembles Mildred, and I think so. Not everyone thinks so, I think so. And there's other family members in the Sanders side of the family, Clarence's side, the Colonel's brother, that carry traits and resemblance to other Sanders. But I really think, and we're going to do another video on this, but I'm going to go into it a little bit. The Dunleavys, if you look at the Colonel's mother, and then you look at the Colonel when he was in his 50s, and you look at him before he died, he resembles his mother quite a bit. And you go through the rest of the Sanders in the family. I mean, my great-great-grandfather, Clarence Edward Sanders, looks like Tom Hanks. Tell me I'm wrong. He looks like Tom Hanks. So, with the exception of that, and I feel like Clarence might resemble more of what Wilbur looked like. Wilbur Sanders, their father, who died very young, and we don't got no photos of him. But I'm thinking that Clarence passed down the Dunleavy traits to this family, because if you look at the Dunleavys, here's a photo of the Dunleavys. If you look at the Dunleavys from that time, they all resemble each other heavily. They look like Lee, and they look like Colonel Sanders, and they look like my grandpa Ed. They look like me. I think that what we're calling the Sanders genes, the strong genes, we refer to it as the Sanders because Colonel Sanders was the most famous, but I really think it's a Dunleavy gene that was passed down through my side. Now, Margaret and Mildred resemble the Dunleavys. They resemble the Colonel. Their children, not so much. They more so resemble their paternal side rather than their maternal side. There's nothing wrong with that, but I find this stuff interesting. the genealogy interesting, and with respecting the privacy of the other family members, I'd like to share what I can on here. So in that next video that we go into, I'm going to go into my genealogy, but you're not going to learn about every single buddy in the family. You're going to learn about the main points of the family. Learn about me, my father, who was a main point because, you know, I came from him, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and then my Wilbur, great-great-great-grandfather, and his father, and his father, and his father, which there's no photos of them, but there is photos on the Dunleavy side of the Colonel's mother, my great-great-great-grandmother Margaret, the Colonel's mother's father and mother, and their father and mother, all the way up. You start to split off from the Dunleavys. The Cleggs married into the Dunleavys. So, well, yeah, no. There's so much of this. Matthew Clegg is one of the Colonel's grandfathers, great-grandfathers, great-great-grandfathers. I think it's his great-grandfather. He served in the Civil War. Matthew Clegg married, and eventually they had Dunleavy children. And the Dunleavys, I think Matthew had a daughter, and the daughter married into a Dunleavy family. And the Dunleavys, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. You can't find it all on the internet. I can't explain it all in this video. I need to pull up my genealogy chart and go through it with all of you. All I can do is share with you some photos, and if that's something you're interested in, I don't know how many people are going to see this video. If I put it on TikTok, we'll get 300 views. Nobody's going to see it on TikTok, and I ain't sure if I'm going to bother with it. If I put it on YouTube, maybe a few hundred people, depending on the format. I'm on this format now, so it might make it go more viral. Or on Instagram, maybe a few thousand people will see it. If it's something that interests you and you want to see the genealogy of my family leading to Colonel Sanders and myself, I will show you it. Again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm not going to be showing you the Colonel's grandchildren. They don't want to be known. They don't want to have that stuff shown. I'm not going to show you everybody on the Omer side, because I don't know everybody over there. I just know what has been shared with me. The Colonel's sister's daughter's son or grandson, who is an Omer, has a hot sauce business. I want to talk about that, and I have permission to talk about that, so we will be talking about that. So if you want to know these points and parts, I'd be happy to share it with y'all. You just gotta let me know. All right, I'm gonna end the video. Thank you for learning about the Colonel's daughter Margaret. I have a better perspective of her. I would like to know her family, but I would have really liked to have known her, because there's a lot of things in here, with the exception to her book, that I would like to talk with her on, such as Atlantis and Albert Einstein and science and sculpting and art, franchising. I would love to learn about that stuff. Now, if folks are wondering if I'm involved in Kentucky Fried Chicken, not yet. I want to be their spokesperson. I want to work with them in some way, shape, or form. Don't know if and how or what, but I'm definitely going to be a historian on the internet and keep the history alive. That's that. Ciao.